and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe. Today's great house is the House of Elros. Of course, this is a rather large house which spans multiple generations and with many family members. The main focus will be on the main line. The house was founded by Elros Tar-Miniatar. Elros lived to be about 500 years old, reigned for 410 years, was the one who helped lead the Edain to the island of Numenor, and would reign for so long that his heir would be so old that he felt himself unable to properly rule when his father died. Said son was Vardamir Nolaman. Vardamir was Elros's eldest son and nephew, of course, to Elrond, half-elven. Vardamir was an exceptional scholar whose only desire was to study rather than to rule, so that when Elros died, Vardamir immediately abdicated in favor of his son Tar-Amandil. He also had 3 other siblings who were all younger than him, but we're not really going to get into them. Tar-Amandil, officially the 3rd Numenorian king, but technically the 2nd, given that his father had declined to take the throne in order to live out the last of his days in quiet study. Amandil took up the throne, as said, and his name means friend of Aman, which likely shows that he was probably of a priestly nature. He, however, would, like his father and grandfather, surrender the scepter of Numenor. He was succeeded by his son Tar-Elendil. Fun fact, 13 years later, he died at the age of 411, willingly giving up his life in order to pass on quietly, as he had no desire to disgrace himself by growing too old. Because the thing about Numenorians is that when old age happens upon them, they have a tendency to become senile and otherwise become rather more decrepit than they might otherwise be. The heir of Tar-Amandil was the 4th official king of Numenor, Tar-Elendil. Fun fact, Amandil and Elendil share the same names as 2 of the Numenorians at the end of the Numenorian period. That said, Tar-Elendil was a master of lore and a noteworthy scholar, rather like his grandfather. His eldest child was Silmarion, a daughter. His second child was Isilme, another daughter. Silmarion probably would have become queen, according to the principle of full cognatic primogeniture. However, even with such laws, the male child would inevitably take precedence over the eldest. Although it appears that Tar-Elendil may have actually favored his daughter as his heir, rather than his eldest son, as Silmarion likely had a better temperament for rule. The next king was Tar-Meneldur. Tar-Meneldur was an astronomer. He loved the stars, and he was apparently close to his sister Silmarion, who agreed to not challenge his claim to the throne, though she may have been favored for the throne. And Tar-Meneldur passed on to her the Ring of Barahir, along with other heirlooms of Numenor. Tar-Meneldur would struggle with his son, Aldarion, and would inevitably, upon seeing a letter from Gil-galad, become a broken man and pass the scepter immediately to Tar-Aldarion. Tar-Aldarion was the eldest son of Tar-Meneldur. He was married to a noblewoman called Arendis. Aldarion and Arendis had a fiery affair, so if you want to know more about that, do check out my Tolkien podcast, Aldarion and Arendis video, for more information. But needless to say, there was a rift that grew between the two because Aldarion loved the sea. The end result was she became broken, he carried on his life as always, and their daughter played them against each other until Arendis died. Tar-Aldarion, though, would be the one to found the overseas colonies of Numenor. Before anyone asks, those colonies were not ones that enforced things like the slave trade quite yet. That would come to pass quite some time later. The next monarch was Tar-Ankhalime. She was the first female ruler of Numenor, and she didn't really have much interest in the throne. She was also known as the Shepherdess Queen. It's around her reign that things begin to turn afoul. Well, more afoul than what had begun in her father's reign. Her father, though, had tried to resist any encroachment of the shadow that had arisen in Middle-earth by siding more and more with the elves and forging close ties with them. Ankhalime neglected these affairs. She was succeeded by her son, Tar-Anarion. Tar-Anarion was the 8th monarch of Numenor. He succeeded his mother in 1280 of the Second Age, and there's not much information that's known about him. His sisters feared and hated their mother, Ankalime, who refused to ever let them marry. Tar Anarion did have a son, Tar Surian. Surian was the ninth monarch. He had two sisters, but they had no interest in ruling, thus did not challenge his claim. It's during Tar Surian's reign, though, that the Rings of Power were born. He was succeeded by his eldest daughter, Tar Telperion, the 10th ruler of Numenor. Tar Telperion succeeded her father. She reigned for 175 years. It's either in her father or her reign that the Rings of Power were forged. She was succeeded by Tar Minastir, the son of her younger brother Isilmo. She died in the year 1731 of the Second Age, without any children. And just a fun fact, she was likely named after Telperion. Tar Minastir was the 11th monarch of Numenor. He was king during the War of the Elves and Sauron in the mid-Second Age, and it would be him who sent a relief force to aid Gil-galad to fend off Sauron. He may not have wished to abdicate the throne when the time came, as it's said that his son, Tar Kiryatan, pressured him into it, though Tar Minastir would die peacefully 4 years after his abdication. Tar Kiryatan was the 12th monarch of Numenor. His rule marked the first coming of the shadow upon Numenor, and he was the first to start speaking out against the Valar and the Band. He also engaged in a great deal of colonialism and dominion abroad, so he was not exactly an okay guy. Like his ancestor Aldarion, loved ships and everything connected to sea lore and ship lore, and he is said to have wrested the scepter from his father, which may suggest that his father died of grief rather than of fully natural causes. You can interject what you think might have really been the cause of his death. It's left quite open. That said, Tar Kiryatan is said to have abdicated in 2029 of the Second Age, after ruling for 160 years. With that said, it's possible that in a role-playing game, Kiryatan was once referred to as the father of the Witch King of Angmar, but this relationship is not founded in J.R.R. Tolkien's work. That said, Helen, the clueless fangirl, has theorized that it's Tar Kiryatan who's the Witch King of Angmar. I personally think this unlikely, though I think it undeniable that he's one of the 9. Tar Kiryatan was succeeded by his son Tar Atanamir. He was also known as Atanamir the Great. He was the 13th king of Numenor, and he is best known for being the first to openly question the ban of the Valar. That is to say, the Valar's refusal to allow Numenorian ships to sail west. He was also the first king to refuse to die willingly and give up the scepter. Death instead took him by force, and thus his reign ended, it is said. And he would rule for 192 years until he was succeeded by his son. But he is also my best guess at the true identity of the Witch King of Angmar, with Kiryatan simply being another of the Nazgul, as at least 3 of the Nazgul are Numenorian. Therefore, for Kiryatan to be one of them would explain a lot, I think. Same with Atanamir. The next Numenorian king, the 14th one, was Tar Ankalaman. It's during Ankalaman's reign that Numenor became divided into 2 political factions. One became known as the Elendili, the Elf Friends, also called the Faithful, who advocated for continued devotion to the Valar and friendship with the Elves. And there was the Kingsmen, who opposed the ban of the Valar and friendship with the Elves. Tar Ankalaman was succeeded by his son, Tar Telemaete. I do apologize for the trouble of the pronunciation. He would, during his reign, seek out as much mithril as could be found, which is how he got his regnal name, the Silver-Handed, reflecting his greed for the precious metal mithril. He was succeeded by his daughter, Tar Vanimelde, who became the 3rd ruling queen of Numenor. She was the 16th monarch of Numenor. She ruled for 111 years, and the kingship should have gone to her son Tar Alcarin, but a nobleman ended up usurping and ruling for 20 years as King Tar Andukul, and with this nobleman having been the previous queen's consort. Yes, the usurper was the king's own father. He's noted for being much younger than his wife, in that he served as regent for many of her duties of state. He would rule for 20 years. He was succeeded by Tar Alcarin, who was the 17th monarch of Numenor. There's not much to say about his reign, but other than there was mounting conflict between the Kingsmen and the faithful, so let's get to his successor. He was succeeded by Tar Kelmakil, who was named the Brightsword, and this is in recognition of the vast territorial victories he had in Middle-earth as a renowned captain of Numenor, likely before he mounted the throne. He was succeeded by his son Tar Ardaman, or Ar-Abataruk, and he was the son of Tar Kelmakil, and he was likely the 19th monarch of Numenor. And he is the last to follow the practice of using an official Quenya name, and was succeeded by his son Ar-Adunakor. He was the 20th ruler of Numenor, and the first to take a Dunaic name instead of a Quenya name, and he obviously favored the king's men. He was succeeded by his son Ar-Zimrathon. Ar-Zimrathon, the 21st monarch of Numenor. And once again, there's not much that can be said. He opposed the Valar too, and was succeeded by his own son, Ar-Sakalthor. And once again, we have an opponent of Valinor who took up the throne, and not much is known. He was succeeded by his son, Ar-Gimilzor. Ar-Gimilzor was remarkably distrustful and even cruel towards those Numenorians who favored the elves and the Valar, and he persecuted them cruelly and forbade the practice of the elvish tongue in Numenor during his reign. He also neglected the White Tree and no longer made pilgrimages to the Hollow of Eru. This was an ancient Numenorian tradition, with the kings having to continuously make that trip there and do public rituals worshipping Eru upon the hill. And he was so distrustful of the faithful that he forced them to move from the haven of Adunie to the eastern part of the island near Romena, so that he could keep a closer eye on them. His wife Inzelbeth was secretly in Elendili, and she passed her ways on to her son. He was succeeded by his son Tar Palantir. Tar Palantir was the 24th king of Numenor. Son of the cruel Ar-Gimilzor, he was to be a great and wise monarch. He was also a prophet, and would end up predicting that the fate of Nimloth, the White Tree of Numenor, was tied to that of the House of Elros. And he would allow the usage of the Quenya tongue, and would take up a regnal name of that sort, in defiance of his father's wishes. However, he would also begin to tend to the White Tree and followed the ancient practices honoring Eru-Ilúvatar. However, there was no response from the Valar, and the view of Tal Eressëa from the Tower of Tar Minastir was shrouded. He designated his only child and daughter, Tar Miriel, as his heir, and she would have followed his policies, but she was usurped by her cousin, Ar-Pharazôn. Ar-Pharazôn mounted a rebellion and took the throne by force and violated her and forced her to become his queen. And he mounted the throne himself with the support of the greater part of Numenor, in clear defiance of Tar Palantir's wishes and last will and testament. Ar-Pharazôn. Now, Ar-Pharazôn is the son of Gimilcad, who was younger brother to Tar Palantir. Gimilcad was a rival to Tar Palantir, despite being his younger brother. Ar-Pharazôn, for his part, was to be nicknamed Ar-Pharazôn the Golden. He wielded the most power in all the history of Numenor, but he was also the vainest, most foolish, and the most wicked, and it was his wish that he rule forever. Following in the example of many of his ancestors, he longed for immortality. He might well have crushed the armies of Sauron, but Sauron surrendered prematurely and agreed to come to Numenor as a prisoner. Foolishly, the short-sighted Ar-Pharazôn would agree to make Sauron his chief advisor. In time, Sauron became chief minister and high priest of Numenor, convincing Ar-Pharazôn to worship Morgoth. And after this, Ar-Pharazôn would attempt to travel west in defiance of the ban of the Valar. Everything that befell Numenor in the immediate aftermath of his attempt to attack Aman and landing there in clear violation of the wishes of Eru-Ilúvatar and the Valar was entirely Ar-Pharazôn's fault. And that's it. That's the House of Numenor. The house waxed and waned rather slowly, and the best monarch was the first, Elros, Tar Minyatar, and it was a slow yet steady descent. Tar Palantir was a noteworthy and capable heir worthy of Elros himself, but sadly his successor was usurped and replaced by the wicked our Pharazôn. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you agree to smash that subscribe button as though you were Eru Iluvatar seeking to bring down the island of Numenor with his great flood.